Today we're going to have an open book test tomorrow. I didn't want to have a test. I prefer projects during this pandemic time, but Chapter 7 doesn't really have a good project. So to make the test easier, it's going to be open book. If we go to the Chapter 7 assignment, Chapter 7 questions, we need to practice knowing our book. So yes, you will be tested on whether or not you know the answers to the questions in your Chapter 7 slides, but you're also going to be tested on the basic vocabulary of Chapter 7 terms. And what's hard about an open book test is time. Some of the questions you should know instantly, and we'll practice with GimKit and other resources. But otherwise, you need to know where to find things in the book and what kind of ideas come from Chapter 7, Section 1, like basic adaptation, the age of the earth, how fossils are formed, vestigial structures, and then how we compare things with skeletons, DNA, and embryos. Section 2's big ideas are Darwin, his trip around the world, specifically to the Galapagos Islands, and the finches he studied there, and then what he learned from farmers and breeders, geologists, and Thomas Malthus. Those ideas he turned into the 4 steps of natural selection that we took notes on, but Darwin didn't know everything by the end of that time. He didn't know how inheritance happened, which is DNA, and he didn't know why individuals were different, which is caused by mutations in DNA. Section 3 applies the idea of Section 2 and shows us that having tons of babies, like insects, and short generation times quadruples the chance that you will have that lucky mutation to help you survive, in this case, a poison, an insecticide, a pesticide. In another instance, another insect with short generation times and lots of babies, the peppered moth, already had a rare form that was dark, and so when pollution darkened its trees, it changed and allowed itself to survive because this form, the peppered form, was no longer camouflaged, and the rare dark form that birds could see easily now was camouflaged. When the pollution ended, the birds reverted back to this peppered form, which you can barely see in this photo. What do we need to become a new species? Well, we need to be separated. So if you're a land species, a canyon or a mountain range might do it. Birds, that doesn't do much. Or if you're an aquatic species, being stuck in a lake might do it. Also, being trapped on islands can do it. But you have to be more than separated. You're separated, you adapt to your new home, and if you accumulate enough adaptations, you can become a new species if you can no longer interbreed. This did not happen with the peppered moths. They adapted. A mutation that already existed became more common, being dark, but the circumstance that changed them didn't last long enough. Now, I will say out in the countryside where there wasn't pollution, this change never occurred. But after about 100 years of smoggy, messy pollution in England, they cleaned up their act and the trees returned to a normal coloration, and so did the moths. So that adaptation, if it doesn't build up enough changes to make it impossible to interbreed, there won't be a new species. And also there needs to be separation. And the peppered moths weren't really separated from the city moths and the country moths. They could interact. So the peppered moths were not on a trajectory to become a new species. The species was changing, but not splitting because they were not separated. Again, I highly recommend looking at vocabulary. So if we go back and look at the Chapter 7 terms assignment, so we can look at classwork and find some terms. There's book questions, activities, way down here. Chapter 7 terms. The other thing we want to spend some time studying is the list of vocabulary. And so some of this we just talked about, but we didn't talk about fossil record or vestigial structure in great detail. So knowing these words would make the test easier so you don't have to hunt them down in the book. Again, open book test, the trickiest part is knowing where to look for answers and knowing enough of the answers from your head so that you don't have to look for them all. You only get one class period, and open book tests generally take longer if you aren't prepared. All right, good luck studying today. Email me if you have questions.